from Shahid Buttar, because he kind of answered that question weird to me. The reason I just like fell off the face of the earth 2 weeks ago is because I've just been really fucking depressed. And it's kind of hard not to be when you look at the state of the U.S. and then you look at the world and you look at how many people are dying every day from whatever cause, and you think of, I'm one of those persons that thinks a lot, right? I don't go anywhere. I don't like being out in public, so I spend most of my time on my farm, farming and thinking, right? Or sitting in this box, which this is my box of doom. Because every time I come in here on my screens is basically what's going on in the world. And it's, other than the few beams of light that we have, it's pretty much a shit show, right? We have governments around the world fighting the populace to survive. That's depressing. It's really fucking depressing. You can't not be depressed about that. Add to that the fact that I have mental health issues, and include really big highs and really big lows. And the problem is I'm used to doing that, experiencing really big highs and really big lows and managing that and dealing with that. And I can have this fun burst of creative energy when I'm on a manic phase, and I can just do nothing and eat a lot when I'm on a depressive phase. But when you're constantly depressed and in despair because your planet is dying and your species is dying and the leaders of your species have their heads in their fucking ass and you're trying desperately to get them to fucking do something, those highs don't, this is where manic depression comes in. I got all this energy, but I don't care because I'm depressed as fuck, right? And this leads to, this is a deeper kind of fucked up depression that's just not good for anybody. And I guarantee you that I am not alone. All right? I know I'm not alone. I'm not unique in this. Right? This guy wrote an article, though, that kind of smacked me in the face, and he did it with my Catholic guilt, asshole. He says, only rebellion will prevent an ecological apocalypse, which is true. And he says, no one is coming to save us. Mass civil disobedience is essential to force a political response. I'm going to read a lot of what he says because it's just much better than anything I would say. And this year for me is the year about saying less, doing more. All right. So just some of the pieces. Had we put as much effort into preventing environmental catastrophe as we spent on making excuses for inaction, we would probably have solved it by now, which is very true. We can thank capitalism. We can thank consumerism, we can thank our government, we can thank Exxon for that, and the narrative spewed out of our mainstream media. As the environmental crisis accelerates and protest movements like Youth Strike for Climate and Extinction Rebellion make it harder not to see what we face, people discover more incentive means of shutting their eyes and shedding responsibility. And I've been doing this as well. I've been closing myself off from the fucking world. It's like, we're all gonna die. I'm just going to prep my little piece of land, take care of the plants and animals, feel good about that, and wait to die. That's really, really where I'm at, right? Because I don't have faith in our government. Neither does this guy. Those who govern the nation and shape public discourse cannot be trusted with the preservation of life on Earth. That is about the scariest, most accurate statement there is. Those who govern the nation and shape public discourse cannot be trusted with the preservation of life on Earth. And that should scare the living fuck out of everybody and keep you awake at night and make people like Greta Thunberg cry, which it does. And it makes me despair and depressed and paralyzed, you know, because this is fucking true. And voting hasn't done so much so far. Being angry hasn't done so much so far. Being out in the fucking streets hasn't done so much so far. Having children speak directly to our fucking politicians has gotten them insults. Patriotism claps, right? When Dianne Feinstein tells a group of kids, I've been doing this for 30 years. I just want to shove her head on a spike. Yeah, and you failed. You fucking failed, you old bitch. And now you're telling these kids that they didn't vote for you? You're fucking insane. You're out of your fucking mind. These old people that run our government are so disconnected from reality. And that makes me not only in despair, but enraged. Right? And I don't know what to do with that energy either. Right? What do I do with this rage and despair and depression? Right? There is no benign authority preserving us from harm. No one is coming to save us. Not Jesus, not aliens. No one but us. Not the kids. I hear everybody's, the kids are going to save us. No, you have to get off your ass too. The kids are asking you, the old fucking people, to get off your ass, pull your heads out, and do something. Me. The guy who doesn't want to leave his box. You know? The kids aren't saying, we're here to save you. The kids are like, what the fuck are you doing? That's what the kids are saying. We're kids. Grow the fuck up. You know? None of us can justifiably avoid the call to come together to save ourselves. Yet we have, as we saw Amis's polls, we're not all together on that. Not even the mainstream media propagandists that for some reason think they're going to survive this. Where do they think they're going to go that 1 billion enraged, starving people aren't going to fight them and eat them? Eat the rich is not a joke. It's not a joke. When our fisheries collapse in a few decades, eat the rich is going to be a very viable thought, right? Did I skip one? Hang on. No. So, this guy goes into what despair is. I see despair as another variety of disavowal. And that's what I've been doing. By throwing up our hands about the calamities that could one day afflict us, we disguise and distance them, converting concrete choices into indecipherable dread. We might relieve ourselves of moral agency by claiming that it's already too late to act. We know it's too late to act. We know it's too late to stop what's happening right now. Climate crisis happening right now. People dying all over the fucking world right now. Animals dying all over the world. How many cows drowned in Nebraska and Iowa and everything that just happened in the flooding, right? I mean, that's the climate crisis happening right now. And those of us who look at it every day, like I do, like Laura does, Marcus does, and Amos does, and everybody in the audience, we all look at this shit every day. It's on social media. But the people that watch MSM, they don't get this. They're shielded from this, right? So they have it a lot easier. Oh, climate isn't affecting me. We saw that in the polls. It's not affecting me directly. Whatever. I'm not so sure. I'm not worried about it. Until it annihilates my part of land. You know? This is where he gets sort of positive. And this is where I'm on the fence. But this is where XR comes in. This is where action comes in. Where Shahid Buttar told me, you know, action and community are the two ways to get out of despair. Well, I'm not a big fan of community, but I can do action. I mean, I like community. I just don't want to be in it. You know what I mean? So this is where this guy talks about historically what it's going to take to make the transformation, and this is where I'm on the fence. Every nonlinear transformation in history has taken people by surprise. As some guy explains in his book about the collapse of the Soviet Union, systems look immutable until they suddenly disintegrate. Now, I know that somebody else, Andrew Goldstein, is it Goldstein? I don't know. Anyway, I interviewed a guy a while ago about Africa, South Africa, and in 6 years, they basically did 180 degrees. Now, they're back the other way again, but at that point in time, they'd made a great change, and it took them about 6 years. We have maybe 6 years to do the same, right? And I think we're facing a greater problem than South Africa faced, honestly, in my view. Our system, characterized by perpetual economic growth on a planet that is not growing, will eventually implode. This is the collapse we're talking about, the collapse of our food systems, the collapse of our monetary systems, right? All these things that have been propped up by capitalism that really don't have anything underneath them, right? We've been gutting our earth and gutting it, and the ocean is not going to sustain this. Our lands are not going to sustain us anymore. We're headed towards that. We can't stop that. We can't stop that. This is where it gets. Our only question is whether the transformation that we have to make is planned or unplanned. Our task is to ensure that it's planned and fast. Right? The government has they don't want to do either. They don't want to plan it, and they don't want to do it at all. We have to change that. We need to conceive and build a new system based on the principle that every generation everywhere has an equal right to enjoy natural wealth. That's supposedly written into the Constitution, I believe, but it's been misinterpreted. This is less daunting than we might imagine. Research says that for a mass movement, a peaceful mass movement to succeed, 3.5% of the population needs to mobilize. I have no idea what number that is. But obviously, we're not even fucking close. All right. Do you guys think we can get to 3.5% of peaceful population protest? And does anybody think peaceful protest in a country with the largest military, most violent military in the history of humankind is going to be peacefully okay with not doing what it does anymore? I don't know about that. But this guy seems to think it's going to work. Today, Extinction Rebellion takes to the streets around the world in defense of our life support systems. Through daring, disruptive, nonviolent action, it forces our environmental predicament onto the political agenda. Who are these people? They're us. Right? Marcus joined Extinction Rebellion. I reached out to Extinction Rebellion and said I would like to, provide media support to you. So we've been looking for a focal point, something to harness, and I think the yellow vest was like kind of an interesting start to that. I think Extinction Rebellion could become what we unify around, and I hope that we do. All right. I will fight every day to not be in despair and not be paralyzed. And right now, this week, this day, things are pretty good. All right. I feel good about what's going on. I feel good about things that have happened recently that I think are going to eventually make some change in California, or maybe help out a candidate, or some change in Oregon and the stuff that we're doing here. Right now, I feel okay and good about it. But that doesn't mean in 48 hours, I won't have seen something that just devastates me in terms of the planet and our environment, and I'll feel differently. And we all have to accept that we're gonna have these highs and lows about how we feel about the revolution. And this is just something it's part of what batters you in the war. And yeah, I realize that here I am, Mr. Privileged guy, sitting in my nice fucking place talking about this stuff, and it's all mental stuff. All right, and that there's kids in cages, and there's people on the streets, and there's people actually dying and shit. And so comparatively, it's like, yeah, whatever, dude. All right. But we all fight our own battles in our own way. This is mine. Right? To not be so depressed, to not be so in despair that I can remain useful to the revolution. Right? And so I want to thank George Monbiot and Shahid Buttar for kind of smacking me around. I can't even find a quote in here, but the one that really hit me in this article, which is somewhere on one of these pages. Here it goes. Giving up before we have reached the threshold of 3 to 5%, 3.5%, is worse than despair. It is defeatism. And then he says in here, I agree with the Christians that despair is a sin. And so that just like nailed me with my Catholic, oh, I'm sinning. Fucking A, what am I doing? And I don't really believe in the concept of sins, but I do believe in the idea of not being useful, or just not really, if you're not going to be effective, then what are you doing, right? So, okay, be useful. Find a way to get over my despair and be useful. And so I took some action this last couple of days on that, reached out to some people so that I could do things that I felt good about, and that's why we're here. So so for all of you guys, that's what I'm trying to say. If you're in despair, if you're feeling shitty about stuff, action and community. Reach out or go fucking do something, right? I spent 3 days doing nothing but my yard. It's like, I don't want to give a fuck about anything but my yard, just so I can feel like I've cared for something and it mattered, right? And then that was healing, and then we moved on, right? So that's my piece.